Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Captains of Industry. I'm Bronwyn Nieslen. The man in the hot seat this evening is Luke Mckend. He's country manager for Google South Africa. Luke, thanks very much for your time. Now, the average age when it comes to a captain of industry is just over 45. And in the internet, in the tech space, we're looking at very young CEOs. Zuckerberg, for instance, run about 28. I see that you are erring on the side of age, being 39 or so in the technology industry. Your days are numbered.
40.
Well,
even, yes.
You've got even fewer days in the industry. How are you holding your own?
I must admit, when I joined Google, it was quite interesting, and particularly in South Africa. I'm in fact the oldest person in office, which I think is quite rare for someone who's reached the ripe old age of 40 to be the oldest person. But it's really testament to how fast the technology business, it really moves very, very quickly. And a lot of the innovations in technology have really happened over the last, 10, 15 years or so. So people who are over 40 tend not to have grown up with the technology, whereas somebody who's 28, like Zuckerberg, for instance, or even the founders of Google, who are in fact younger than I am, have grown up with technology. They've lived it. They are digital natives to a large extent, and as a result, they're able to come up with things that perhaps those of us who are slightly older simply can't see opportunities for.
How do you keep up with the innovation then? Because that must be a key part of the game.
I'm very fortunate that I work with a fairly young team, and I think that's incredibly important. We work with people across the industry who have, not just from an age difference point of view, but also have hugely varied interests. And I think for me, it's incredibly important to just have touch points with people who have different viewpoints all the time, whether they're young, old, or just have different viewpoints to my own. That's incredibly important, and it helps you reconnect to people who can show you what's possible with things that perhaps you don't know about.
When Stephen Newton gave up his position in 2010, it took 6 months to find a replacement. You have been with Google since 2006. What was the hold-up? Was it the skill set? Was there something particularly needed in the South African environment to head up Google SA?
I think it was more just the fact that what we were really trying to do is build Google South Africa with a long-term point of view, and trying to find people who both want to work in South Africa with that long-term perspective, but also have international experience, also perhaps have a Google point of view. There aren't that many of us around. So from that point of view, I was actually quite fortunate.
Now, why your move into the Google fold? Because you were commercial director of iGrasp in the UK, which in its own right was starting to gain traction and could be the next big thing. Why did you make the move from a successful venture into Google?
Well, that was a very interesting business. I joined it pretty much just after startup phase. It was a very small business when I joined, and it grew incredibly fast. We grew to about 40 people in about 2 or 3 years, and that business was actually sold. I worked for the acquiring company for a short period of time, probably about a year or so, working with them to integrate the technology that we had developed into their sales teams across Europe. And ultimately, working for an acquiring company is sometimes not quite as interesting as actually building the business in the first place. And I started to look around for other opportunities. And at the time, was really thinking about where will technology go and who are the most interesting companies in the internet space to work for. And let's face it, if you're going to work in the internet space, why not work with one of the big guys? And Google was certainly at the time growing very fast. It still is. And it's proven to be a good move to have made.
What is the culture like at Google SA? Given the fact that, and it's before your time, we know that there was a very aggressive sales team, there was some infighting, there was a lawsuit, reputation damage. Are all those things behind Google SA, and what is the culture when it comes to the corporation?
I think generally speaking, what we try and do is really mirror the Google culture, which is present all over the world. And really that culture is based on being, I suppose, very open. Within Google, it's something that we pride ourselves upon, that you're able to talk to anybody about virtually anything. And even the office space in our larger offices is designed to facilitate that kind of communication. And I think that's something that we try and do as best we can within a smaller office environment in South Africa. And of course, what we tend to do is hire really good people. And that means that people are ambitious.
But this is when it comes to your sales team now.
Oh, absolutely, but not just the sales team. I mean, if you want to develop the most and the best and most innovative technology, you really have to have people at the top of their game, whether they're the most interested in the products that they're selling, whether they understand those the most, or whether they're technical coders, infrastructure engineers. All of them have to be at the top of the game. And I think it's incredibly important for us to work with people who really want to be the best in their space. And yes, that means that I suppose in some cases we're very enthusiastic about what we do. And I'd like to believe that that enthusiasm is something that shines through in all of the interactions that we have. And certainly in the last year and a half, I believe that we've managed to maintain that balance of both hopefully competence, enthusiasm, and just general go-get attitude that makes Google the kind of force that it is today in the world.
Coming from the UK and looking at the tech environment, the IT environment in South Africa, are we decades behind? Are we on a par? Are we fast coming up to where we should be?
Look, it is a very different place, and I've been pleasantly surprised, having been in the UK for about 12 years or so, coming back mostly for a holiday in Cape Town, as most South Africans do when they're in the UK. Coming back to Johannesburg was a surprise and a pleasant one on a number of different fronts. One of which is that South Africans get a lot of stick, perhaps, in the techno space for not being as sophisticated as the rest of the world, which in a lot of cases is simply not true. I think we see businesses in all areas that we deal with that are equally as sophisticated as some of the most sophisticated in the world. I think, however, that is unfortunately not the case for the broad spectrum of businesses that we deal with. There are shining stars, and there are a lot of those that are world class. What we'd like to try and make sure that, particularly in the digital space, that there's a broader base of competence that stretches not just across those shining stars, and there are a few of them, but across large businesses as well as small businesses in South Africa, who are probably those that will benefit most from being exposed to internet technologies and to the markets that the internet can bring to them.
In terms of Google South Africa and your independence from your head office in the US, you have autonomy to do what you need to, enough room to maneuver in a completely different territory to the US?
One of the cultural aspects within Google is that it can be a very entrepreneurial environment. And we are certainly encouraged to come up with ideas that are local, relevant. And if you look at the way that we operate, not just in South Africa, but in sub-Saharan Africa, having a locally relevant program, I think, is incredibly important to Google. And that's why we actually have people on the ground in South Africa, in Nairobi, in Lagos, in Senegal, in Ghana, in Uganda. It's incredibly important to have people in those places so that you can understand what's actually happening, what users are really doing with the technology, and that helps you be relevant. So yes, with those sorts of people on the ground, local people who understand the people, who understand what technology is being used for, I think it's possible to do things that are locally relevant, but within the framework that suits Google overall.
Broadband and its prevalence on the African continent, this must be something that is very challenging when it comes to establishing your business.
And in fact, one of the three pillars that we would work on throughout Africa is in fact access, is what role can we play in terms of making sure that more people are able to benefit from the internet than just the small amount of people that typically in South Africa, for instance, 10% of the population, maybe 10 million at most, currently have access to the internet. We'd like to see a lot more people be able to benefit from being connected in the way that most of the rest of us take for granted.
Luke, in terms of your play in Africa, West Africa, East Africa, are you seeing the continent as regional plays, or are you conquering country by country rather?
Look, I think it's really early days in terms of the rest of Africa, and even trying to discuss it in terms of big blocks or big regions. What we're really focusing on at the moment is trying to understand how technology can best be utilized in each country, and that's why the teams are where they are. It may be that ultimately things change, but I think right now we're focusing on doing the best job we can in the countries where we have a presence.
Coming back to Google South Africa and the business model that you are deploying at the moment, search engine optimization, that's what we associate with Google. Can you elaborate on the business plan?
Well, there are two or three different elements to what we do. And one of which is search engine optimization. Let's just be clear, is when you search for a particular item on the internet using Google at the moment, there are two parts to every search. The first part is search engine optimization, are those results that appear below the sponsored bits at the top. And those results are free to advertisers, or not to advertisers, but to businesses and to users. The part that we deal with specifically is usually referred to as search engine marketing. So there's a slight difference. The optimization piece, every business can participate, and they should make sure that their businesses are discoverable by Google.
Well, that's putting the correct keywords in play, so that
yes.
That's what we are referring to.
So if you have a small business, for instance, promoting a B&B in Soweto, of which there are many, making sure that the website that you have has content that accurately describes your business, where it is, and think a little bit about the kind of terms that people will use to actually try and find you. And it might not be that apparent. You know, sometimes people might just search very broadly for B&B. Others might be very specific, B&B in Soweto. Others might even look for a street name. So make sure that all of the things that are related to your business that make it unique are actually described on your website. That's what Google will look at when it tries to provide a relevant result to somebody who searches.
Do you guide people on this front? Is that part of the business?
Search engine optimization is not something we typically get involved in. What we tend to do mostly is work with our larger businesses in South Africa, getting the most out of their digital marketing budgets. So if I'm going to spend money promoting my business online for whatever reason, I want to sell a product, I want to be more visible with a large group of people, we will help them understand how to reach their audiences using Google products as best we possibly can.